AI feels like magic right now because everyone is focused on the possible upside. But the leaders who win with AI are the ones who are clear sighted enough to look at the costs hidden beneath the hype. In this video, I'll break down the real costs of building an AI system that delivers value so you can understand what it will really take to build great AI systems for your company. Okay, first, let's start with one of the most obvious costs: the people that you'll need to build these systems. Either by hiring people internally or by hiring external consultants, in order to build AI systems, you're going to need people with expertise. Specifically, you're going to need people with expertise in data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. Now, I know you might be thinking if you're building AI, you're just looking for people with AI experience. Well, a lot of people I've found that claim to be AI experts don't actually know a lot about the foundations of the discipline. So, what you need to be looking for is people with a lot of experience, primarily in data and data science, because data is actually one of the foundations of building great AI systems. Almost all AI systems need data in some form. You should also be looking for people with expertise in machine learning. Machine learning is the discipline of training artificial systems how to perform better on a task by exposing them to data. Effectively, all modern AI is a type of machine learning, so you're going to need people with this skill set. Having said that, these people don't necessarily come cheap. Machine learning experts and data science experts, and certainly true AI experts, these people can be fairly expensive. And if I were you, I would not skimp on this. There are a lot of possible pitfalls when you're building systems. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress through the video. But if the people that you hire don't actually know a lot of those pitfalls, they won't be able to guard against them. And that can expose you to potential further risks or higher costs. Next, let's get into one of the costs that might be a little bit more of a hidden cost, and that's data. Now, there are a variety of different types of AI. I've talked about that in past videos. There's generative AI, like large language models. There's predictive AI, unsupervised learning, which we typically use for finding patterns in data, AI agents, and a few others as well. To perform in a precise and accurate way, almost all of these types of AI need data of one kind or another. And what that means is you either need to have the data internally inside of your company, or you need to go and buy that data from an external vendor. There are data vendors that will sell you data that you can use to build or train AI systems. In most cases, though, a lot of the data should be coming from your own company. Having said that, even if you're taking data from inside of your company, in many cases, that data needs to be organized and stored and structured in certain ways in preparation for building an AI system. We call that data engineering. That data engineering does add a fair amount of cost to a system. So if your data is kind of scattered around your company, let's say in spreadsheets or text files, system logs, or elsewhere, you're probably going to need to do a little bit of work to get that data prepared for the AI system that you're building. So you need to be aware of this if you're serious about building an AI-centric company or using AI for maximum leverage in your business. You will need to think about the data and the costs associated with that. The next cost is development and prototyping. Usually, when you're building an AI system, this is certainly true for things like predictive AI systems, but also things like chatbots, AI agents, you're very frequently going to have a prototyping phase. Now, before that, you usually have sort of a discovery phase where you're trying to figure out exactly what problem to solve. But once you start building, you're often going to start with some prototypes. It's not always clear exactly how a particular business problem should be solved. So, an AI or machine learning team is often going to try a couple of different solutions to a problem using different techniques or different algorithms. And then the pros and cons will be assessed and communicated to the broader decision making team. So, a decision can be made about whether to move forward with the project, and if so, which particular solution to use. During this phase, a system will be architected. It will typically be trained. I talked to you before about the data piece. During system training, there's training that happens so a system can learn how to perform well on a target metric. And in order to do that, you need some infrastructure set up. You'll need to have maybe some training hardware or access to a cloud computing system like AWS, and so on. Next, we have something called inference costs. So, after the prototyping and development phase of a project, a solution is typically selected, and then that solution is developed further into a hardened system that can be put into deployment. Now, that deployment actually has its own costs. You're probably familiar with this a little bit. If you go to a off-the-shelf AI system like ChatGPT and you start entering queries and asking questions, it waits and usually processes for a few seconds, sometimes 20 or 30 seconds, and then it will give you an answer. During that time delay, the system itself is quote unquote thinking. It is processing your question or query and then figuring out how to respond. That processing of the input query and generating a response is what we call inference. And all of that inference has costs. Now, depending on the exact architecture that you're using, the algorithm that you're using, and the additional components that are in place alongside the core algorithm, the costs can change depending on those choices and the overall architecture. Some types of architectures have relatively low inference costs. They are cheap to run in an ongoing way. And some systems have very, very high inference costs. We're actually seeing this right now with companies like OpenAI. They reserve their absolute best models for their $200 a month plan. And then everyone else gets the somewhat lower quality models. That's currently right now in 2025. And the reason is that OpenAI's best models simply cost more to run. They have higher inference costs. So this is an ongoing cost that you are going to have. You need to understand how much every unit of output is going to cost you. In a large language model, the output units are tokens. In other types of systems like predictive AI systems, it's usually just a generated output. We might call this a label or a target value. But setting aside some of the mechanics of inference, you have to be aware of how much every unit of output is going to cost. And to be perfectly honest, you should think a little bit about how much each of those units of output are going to add to your P&L and to your overall key metrics. That is a whole other topic and a little bit complex to get into here, but you should be aware of the relative costs of a unit of output versus the relative benefit of a unit of output. And that can be measured if you're working with someone who really knows what they're doing. Okay, next is one of the most overlooked costs for building an AI system, and that's monitoring and maintenance. AI systems don't work perfectly forever. As I said previously, you often need to train AI systems or machine learning systems, certainly predictive AI, but AI agents and other types of systems like large language model based systems, they often need to be trained or fine tuned for particular workflows. And even if you can train a system to perform really well right now, those systems often degrade over time. We call this model drift. And it's essentially where a model performs kind of right on target for the time being. But over time, the system sort of starts getting off target and it degrades. It drifts off target, model drift. This is a very well understood phenomenon in machine learning and AI operations, AI ops. And what that requires is you often need to go back and retrain the system later on, just tune it up a little bit, just like you would maybe take a car in for a tune up every 6 months to a year. You often need to do something very similar with AI and predictive systems. But to find those problems, you actually need to have monitoring systems set up. This is a non negotiable. We call this machine learning ops, ML ops, or AI ops. And it's just a set of processes and systems to gather data on system performance, record that, and then flag any potential problems over time. And then there's still maybe additional things like model audits and documentation. And speaking of audits, that actually brings us to our next point. The next AI cost I want to talk about is compliance and risk. There are rules and regulations around what types of data that you can use and how systems can be structured. Some of these things relate to avoiding inappropriate uses of data. You are not allowed to use certain types of demographic information to make predictions, at least in the United States. There's also data privacy laws, and you need to protect against things like data leaks and other things. And systems, if they're poorly architected, do have risks around these issues. So, all that is to say that this can add further cost to a system. And finally, there is integration and change management. Unfortunately, this is frequently where the ROI from AI and machine learning systems, this is frequently where the ROI goes to die. A lot of companies forget about this. You need to integrate your AI systems with other technology systems in your business. Things like CRM systems, APIs for your other SaaS software, and so on. There's also training the people that are in your business to use your AI system properly. If you don't do that, you might not get the full value out of your AI system. So, all that is to say, there are additional costs around system integration and cultural change inside of a business if you want your AI system to deliver real value. Most of these costs don't show up in a vendor pitch deck, and that's exactly the problem. There's a lot of hype around AI right now, and a lot of vendors are pitching smoke and mirrors. Many of them are focusing on or even overstating the possible benefits and failing to communicate all of the full costs. That being said, in this next video, I'll show you how to spot the fake AI experts before you waste time, money, and credibility. Check it out here.